You damn right y'all gonna need a complete game, Kirby.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into our Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And our Atlanta Football Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So can the run game survive a big blow? We'll discuss. And Kirby Smart suspended? We'll discuss that too. But first, let's talk about this being the first time since the 2021 season opener that Georgia will be listed as an underdog in a game and how they can get the upset in Austin. So Kirby Smart said during Monday's presser, "I want them to play their best game against Texas." Quote, "Simply stated, we have not played our best game. We have not put a complete game together. And that's what every coach's goal is, which is to play your best game moving forward." With that in mind, Jarvis, what does a best game, a complete game look like to you first on offense?
I think for me, I want to see Dillon Bell continue to show and prove that, hey, I can be the number one guy. Kobe Young, if you don't want to act right, and Arian Smith, you want to continue to drop balls and drop touchdowns and big play, and not be consistent catching the football. Sure, yeah, I want to see Dillon Bell to continue to do that. I want to see Trevor Etienne be able to still be the focus on this offense as far as handing the ball off to him, because the guy is a game breaker. Anybody one-on-one, I'm taking him. I'm putting my money on him one-on-one in the open field any day, all day. So I want to see that offense continue to evolve. I want to see Carson Beck continue to make plays and not necessarily have those lows, because he still had some against Mississippi State, right? But I feel like sometimes his wide receiver kind of let him down, on a few plays there, specifically the tight ends. But I think that for him, he has to continue to run this offense, continue to get things going, and be the conductor of this offense like he's supposed to be.
Yeah, and for you, Brian, in terms of that complete game, the best game of the season, what does that mean for you? What does that look like for you on offense?
I don't know what it looks like because they haven't done it yet this year. And it's one of those situations where you're kind of like, I think I might know what it looks like. I think I might know what it should look like. It looks a lot like that second half against Clemson, I think. If you look at what happened there, just the balance of the pass and the run, that combination, what was happening. The other thing for me is staying on schedule, like the whole game too. There's been a lot of talk about starting off slow, not starting off slow. Okay, well, did they start off slow if they scored a touchdown on the first drive? Well, yeah, but then the next couple drives weren't great. So maybe 2 drives in a row to start the game where you wind up scoring touchdowns and not making a mistake and not throwing a pick and not getting to 3rd and 8 on your first possession and not having a drop ball. Like, just playing, honestly, like clean football. Like, don't make mistakes. Don't have a penalty. Don't have an issue. Just if you play clean, I think it'll come along with it. And I think what it also looks like on offense, to be more specific with the players, is 15 to 20 touches for Etienne through 3 quarters. And then Frazier's the one who's kind of putting this thing away. If Branson Robinson doesn't wind up playing this weekend, I think it's a combination of that. I think it's using Lawson Lucky a little bit more. I think he's starting to emerge out of that tight end room. And I think it's also incorporating Anthony Evans into this offense, which we saw on Saturday and saw a real explosion from him. He had about 100 total yards altogether, all-purpose yards, if you will, between rushing, receiving, and a few on that punt return too. And he's just special when he gets the ball. So he's someone I think who's going to need to make a big play on Saturday for Georgia to win this game.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at time of possession, because for me, if Georgia wins the battle of time of possession, keeping Quinn Ewers off the field, I think that's also a positive for them as well. But to you guys' point, it also means that everybody that you just mentioned, whether it's Arian Smith doing his thing with the pass game, or whether it's Trevor Etienne doing his thing with the run game, and Carson Beck orchestrating everything from the opening drive all the way through to the final game, that's to me what I would see as a complete game as well. Because again, it'll show that you are really leaning into all phases of what you have to offer on offense, and we'll actually see every player, guys, every single player playing his best game. I don't think we've seen all 11. Heck, I don't even think we've seen 9 or 11 of 8 or 11 playing enough of a complete game or enough of a best game in the entirety of this season. Yes, we've seen it in quarters. Yes, we've seen it for maybe back-to-back possessions here and there, maybe even a half, but a complete game, not quite yet. And Jarvis got to go to the defensive side of the ball, because this is the side where everybody's been, I mean, granted, this Bulldogs defense has been banged up, so we do want to put a caveat there as well. But there have also been moments in time where the ones who haven't been banged up have made some very questionable plays, like we talked about with Malachi Starks last game. I mean, I think we were all scratching our heads at some of the decisions, that he made, and some of the obvious misses on eye control and communication with that team. So with that side of the ball. So for you, what is a best game? What does a complete game look like on the defensive side?
I think for me, it starts up front. That's where I'm always going to start, until I leave this earth. But and I think it starts with Ty Ingram Dawkins. And, I think he's emerged as a guy that I really, really like what he's doing and what he's putting together when he's lined up in past situations and against the run as well. He's a very disruptive guy. I think he has a future in the NFL, in my humble opinion. So, and I think with him, Mikel Williams has to get healthy. He still seems like he's on a little pitch count, for the most part. So I think there are some things that, he needs to get together in order for him, because shoot, coming up this weekend, this is the perfect time to be healthy, right? If there any time for you to be able to go out there and be productive and playing 80, 85 to 90% of the snaps, this is the game for sure. And I think that, having a Mikel moment in a game like this is what a complete game look like. That line getting right, because one thing that I've noticed throughout this season is that linebacker core hasn't necessarily lived up to their billing. There was one particular play where it was kind of like outside zone kind of stretch play, and Ty Ingram Dawkins had occupied like two offensive linemen who were trying to get outside of him to get up to the next level, and he was holding off both of them. Raylan Wilson was nowhere to be found, and then Dan Jackson, the little human missile, comes and saves the day, and at least slows the guy down. So the other corner come back and make a tackle. So it's just little things like that. Like, you have to be there. If your defensive linemen are holding those blockers off of you, there's no reason why you shouldn't be there to make those tackles. When you talk about being sideline to sideline.
Yeah. This defense Mikel has to get right. I know we talked about a Mikel moment. We need Mikel moments. We need plural. We need multiple plays. We need multiple things go. I really, Mississippi State still scored 31. They were impressive offensively going into Sanford Stadium and doing that. And we had talked about last week on our Tuesday podcast here, like maybe rest Mikel a little bit, heading into this game against Texas. I know maybe you needed him sort of against Mississippi State a little bit, but you're going to go into this game against Texas having him on limited snaps too. So it can't just be Ty Ingram Dawkins, who's the disruptive one. We saw moments with Jalen Walker earlier in the season. He had a lot of pressures in different games. He hasn't got the gaudy sack numbers aren't there, but he's getting those pressures, or was earlier in the season. So that's something that you need to see these guys come along with. Xavier McLeod, I'm missing the last name here for a moment, but he's been showing flashes as well. So it's kind of like now you need that collective effort of you keep looking over and it's like, all right, it's Ty Ingram Dawkins, but who else is coming with him? And then you look at what happened in the secondary this past Saturday and the miscommunication at home against Mississippi State multiple times. I mean, these were huge chunk plays, and people might look at this game and go, oh, Mississippi State might have gotten lucky with a couple plays. Like, no, they were kind of gashing Georgia at different times. There was 18 yards pickups and 50-yard pickups and 70-yard pickups and all these different spots. And a lot of it was Malachi Starks too, and just flat out missed assignments. And you had corners getting burned.
Which was so odd.
It's so strange, Yeah.
And to be honest with you, that I'm glad you brought it up, because it's not like they were playing some exotic zone coverage. These dudes being beat man to man. It's man to man coverage. It's it. I'm talking about. It was one particular play with Van Buren. It was almost like he took the shotgun snap, took one step, boom, and let it go. And I was just like, how you letting these wide receivers get on top of you that quickly? So there's obviously there ain't no miscommunication. You just got to get better. You can't get beat like that, man. Like, especially not that quickly, because you're not getting your defensive line any opportunity to get home if the quarterback's getting rid of the football that quickly. So yeah, there are some things that I'm talking about. It was all the corners, Humphrey, Everett, all of them, including Malachi Starks as well. You think a guy like of his caliber won't get faked out like that, because like I said, Mississippi State was Jeff Levy was calling some solid plays. He had some good play designs sprinkled in there throughout the game. So, but yeah, you just don't expect that from a guy like Malachi Starks. But yeah, that cornerback room, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the freshman Robinson a little bit more, because I like what I saw with him as far as turning around and tracking that ball down when it's up in the air. So yeah, it's going to be some interesting changes, I feel, coming up in this big game against Texas.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the secondary, because interestingly enough, the group that maybe hasn't given us the best game or the complete game doesn't see themselves as underdogs, but everybody else does. We'll talk about that when we come back and go between the hedges. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs edition, is brought to you by Roy. Hey, Dogs fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player of your choice, which is the coolest thing. But because you kind of have control of that, unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support's going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. And the best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you actually get your money back. So money back guarantee is always a good look no matter what. And you don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code Locked On, and you're entered. Now this week, the player of choice that you might want to support is none other than Trevor Etienne. He's absolutely had a monster game, and he's one that's kind of setting the table, and we hope to see him set the table again this upcoming week. But also Anthony Evans III, you might want to look at him. He brought some noise to this Georgia Dogs offense last week as well. So you got some opportunities of players where even if you actually lend $10, or you actually pitch $100, show your players some love and keep them connected to the school. So again, download Roy now, join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees, and be sure to check them out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_. And you can get more info to support the players and change the game. All right, guys, we were talking a lot about some of the challenges that we saw in the secondary last week. And Dan Jackson had some interesting things to say Monday during media day out at Athens. He said, quote, "I don't personally believe that we're ever an underdog, but that's kind of how I've been seeing it throughout my career. I'm not worried about the guys we have in our room one bit. Georgia is a 3.5-point underdog to Texas, BG. So does Jackson maybe not believe the Dogs are underdogs, as he said, but do you believe they are?"
I do believe they are, and I think they should use it, right? Like, this is an opportunity to be like, they don't believe in you, all this stuff. You gotta work for it. You gotta go get it. But we're also halfway through the season. This team is what it is to a certain degree. Like, it is a flawed football team that is not the cream of the crop. They are not that much better than everybody else. They aren't, they're still getting the benefit of the doubt sometimes on these betting lines, huge spreads against Auburn and Mississippi State that they didn't cover. For those interested in that kind of thing, Georgia's 1-5 against the spread this year. So they haven't been covering those numbers that Vegas has been putting out there. So I'm not surprised at all, because even when we were talking Saturday, I had said to you, Tenitra, I don't know what the line is, but Texas should be favored by a couple points in this game. Like, it just makes sense that they're doing it, because they're one of the most balanced teams in the country, especially on offense. I mean, they're scoring any which way that they want to right now at this moment. So, I know that that's been the approach of people are out to get us. We're the hunted, but you got to go hunt. You got to go hunt Texas on Saturday. Like, that's going to be, you got to go in and prove yourself there. I think the pressure is on Georgia in this game, despite it being at home for Texas. They're the ones that have something to prove here on Saturday night.
Yeah, JD, I feel the same way, because you're looking at a team that, we know that with the 12-team playoff, a 2-loss team can definitely get in. But if you're losing that second game, that would be 2 losses in the last 3 weeks. then that's a bit of a challenge for you. It's like an uphill battle where you're literally going to have to win out every single game for the rest of the season. So yeah, I agree with BG. I think the pressure is on the Dogs. And yeah, I do feel like they're the underdogs because so far what we've seen out of Texas, pretty much every game this season is them firing on all cylinders in all phases of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, but here's my thing. Like looking at who Texas has played, UTSA, Colorado State, they played one real SEC school. I haven't gotten there yet. Oklahoma doesn't really count for me. That's like an old Big 12 matchup, they just kind of transferred over. They still being indoctrinated into the whole SEC vibes, right? So, and the only SEC team they play is Mississippi State. Now, granted, they whooped them up pretty good. It was pretty games kind of out of hand for the most part. So, and I think people have to kind of look at the matchup, right? Because styles always make fight. You can't say, hey, oh, they beat this team handily. Oh, yeah, they should be beat Georgia. No, I don't necessarily buy that. I'm on the standpoint of I don't mind Georgia being the underdog, but it's a lot of people talking real reckless out here. Like it's about to be a blowout and all that. So I was like, hey, hold your horses. Hold your horses. Kirby can win the big game. Just let's be clear. Let's make sure he can win the big game. Alabama, that's a whole another conversation. But when it comes down to it, you got to really look at it from a standpoint of to say, hey, do they have the players to match up with those guys? I believe so. Have they played an offense that Georgia is capable of being? Not saying Georgia's been consistent playing offense, but at their peak, I feel like the second half of the Alabama game is probably peak Georgia for me.
Yeah.
As far as from an execution standpoint. Can Texas match up with that? They're going to have to match up with this. So I feel like, there are some components of this offense that has started to come together. And I feel like this is going to be more of a game than people think. I know the spread is on I think it's on FanDuel at 3.5. So if you're talking about that's a pretty tight game. So I feel like this is going to be a good one. And I feel like Kirby's going to have those guys ready to go.
Well, you can hope so. But, to your point, I do see that, yeah, Texas hasn't had exactly the cream of the crop of the SEC that they're playing against. But all you can do is play with the opponent that you have in front of them. And I think the challenge that we have is that there have been times where the opponent that is in front of Georgia, you didn't expect what you saw, and then you got what you got. And I think that's what makes you the most concerned. And we know they can do it, but will they? And will they be able to do it the entirety of a game? Because we've seen halves like that half where they almost came back against Alabama, and we've seen quarters or halves like Clemson, but it's like, okay, we're coming into the midpoint of the season and we still haven't seen you do it the whole time in all phases. And I think that's why, for me, I hear what Dan Jackson is saying, and I can't agree with them more. Like, you should not feel worried. You should be confident in your guys. I would just be confident in your guys if I saw it on more consistent level. Now, one thing that we did get out of Monday's report as well, Monday's presser with Kirby Smart, was that the early injury report has Branson Robinson out with an MCL sprain. So for you, BG, what does that mean for the run game for the Dogs come Saturday?
Honestly, it'll look pretty similar to what it looked like this past Saturday, because Branson only wound up with three carries on the game. They were mixing Frazier in earlier than I thought they were going to, and I think they want to try to maybe keep Etienne fresh. Maybe he isn't that kind of guy who should get 20-plus carries. I know he's been getting close to 20-plus touches, and as far as adding the receiving game with the carries there as well. So I think it'll wind up being a situation where it's 15 to 20 touches for Etienne, but I think it'll be somewhere in that 10 to 15 range for Frazier, assuming Robinson is out. And then, of course, you'll have Cash Jones in there mixed in as well. They do like to use him on pass pro. He's made a couple mistakes here and there, but he's ahead of where Frazier is as far as pass pro goes. So with that rotation, you'll probably see in Cash Jones a good amount of snaps as well.
And I think, Nate Frazier, he's just different. It's something like when you hand the ball off to him, it is just downhill. And I know Kirby loves that. I know it hurts Kirby's soul not to be able to put that young man in there because of pass blocking. Because we know young running backs, they deal with it as freshmen coming into college, and they deal with it as rookies coming into the NFL. It's just part of the game. You have to be able to do that. And you don't, because one thing that happens when you do come in the game and teams start to recognize that, hey, he's not going to be passing, more than likely they're going to hand the ball off to him. You become obvious. And in a Mike Bobo offense, you don't want to become obvious, and Kirby knows that. So I think that he's going to be sprinkled in like BG mentioned. But I love when the football is in his hands. The dude is just a one step, one cut, and just downhill, and he's just so explosive. So you really understand why they brought him in. So I feel like I'm not too concerned with Robinson being out, because I like that threesome, so to speak, to kind of get this thing going, get that run game going.
Indeed. So there was an interesting backlash against Kirby Smart this past weekend. I don't get it, but let's talk about it in What's Next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs Edition, is brought to you by FanDuel. So NFL fans, you can continue the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. So as you know, the Falcons had a good first quarter of the season, going 4-2. Now they are facing another tough 5-game series of games that starts with the Seattle Seahawks at home Sunday. But let's say you get a hunch in the middle of that game about what's going to happen offensively, whether you think it's Kirk Cousins that's going to have another monster game, or whether you think it's going to be the 1-2 punch of Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, you get a hunch. You might want to go to FanDuel.com. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that is programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today also brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Jarvis, Kirby Smart reached out to Mississippi State head coach Jeff Lebby and QB Michael Van Buren Jr. after Kirby shoved Van Buren during the fourth quarter of Saturday's game. Now, Monday, Smart said he didn't realize he had pushed him until watching film of the play after the game. Kirby said he called Lebby Saturday, Van Buren the next day, apologized. Some are calling for Kirby's suspension, but the commissioner did come out this morning, Greg Sankey, to say, hey, you probably should have gotten penalized for that, but didn't necessarily go as far as to say Kirby should have been suspended. What say you?
No suspension. That's ridiculous. Because here's the thing: if you looking at the breakdown of the incident, he wasn't even looking at Van Buren. He was solely focused on where Schumann was and trying to say, hey man, get out the way, And I know how coaches can be on the sidelines. Those dudes be so laser focused on what they're trying to do. Like anybody that's in the way, you probably gonna be a little casualty, But in all seriousness, though, I feel definitely a penalty for sure, because you're not supposed to touch players, and I think that's where it stops, right? Because and shout out to Kirby for doing a man thing and saying, hey man, here's what happened, coach. I would love to speak to him and talk to the young man and apologize to him or whatever, and just say, hey, this is what happened. I'm sorry. And move on. We don't need all this extra stuff, suspension and it should be fine. All that's ridiculous. I'm glad that he actually handled it. He saw it. He recognized it. He did what he needed to do. Just the refs probably should have called it and gave him a penalty.
Yeah, it was one of those things that was so funny. The way this whole thing was overblown. Like, no, you should not touch another player. It shouldn't have happened. It was a bad situation. I'm thinking it might be just the first step in the recruitment process for Van Buren to transfer to Georgia in 2 years. Like, I think he was just like, hey, man, you're playing well. I know how this works. I see what you're doing here as a true freshman today in Sanford Stadium. I'm going to need 3 quarterbacks in 2 years anyway. So if you want to just start to think about coming on down this way, no, but it was just one of those things that was so funny. The other thing we were kind of joking about, I was joking about with some people yesterday, is that maybe Kirby was just trying to get his defense a little bit more physical, a little bit more into the game, showing him that he could play a little bit there too. So it was one of those things that people took and ran with, but there was no way in hell that Kirby was going to be suspended, especially for this game against Texas on Saturday night, Do you think you want the
Nah,
Greg Sankey and the SEC want that to be the storyline? Like, yeah,
Right.
Kirby Smart forearm shivered the quarterback from Mississippi State. Now all of a sudden he's not in Austin for this game on the sidelines. That would be crazy if that wound up being a thing. So I think he handled it in the right way. It'd also be funny just to hear that conversation, because I bet the coach Levy was just like, yeah, it's not a big deal at all. I appreciate the call. Like, I bet it was just a funny back and forth, and it was and I bet it was very complimentary from Kirby after that. Like, hey, you got a quarterback, you're headed in the right direction. Because again, no moral victories in the SEC, but what Mississippi State did on Saturday in Sanford, that was impressive.
Absolutely was impressive. And Jarvis, we'll talk about kind of keys to the game for Georgia in just a second, but I wanted to share with you guys some breaking news that Georgia and Georgia Tech will play their 2025 game at Mercedes Benz Stadium. So they are moving. Yeah, they're going big time, guys. So I just wanted to get you guys' reaction to that news that rivalry game will be moving to the Benz next season.
How about that? Brent Key, you better get right. You don't want to be going over there to get embarrassed. I'll tell you much. But yeah, this is really cool because, and it goes to show you that, Brent Key is actually doing something.
Absolutely.
Right? He got something going on. Not that he's there yet, but he's building a program. He's something to respect. And I think that he's a football guy. He's a football coach, not a club promoter. So I think when you have those things being recognized and those things being respected, you have to acknowledge them, right? And then. And we know what it's all about, baby. It's all about that green stuff. That's they look like rectangles and got the dead presidents on it, man. That's what this is all about. How many bodies can we get in Mercedes-Benz and pack this bad boy out? So yeah, that is the main reason, but it doesn't happen unless Brent Key starts to get this team to a point where they're actually respectable.
Yes,
I hate this. I hate it, and I do.
Coming from a Georgia alum, for those who don't know.
No, it's not even the Georgia alum thing. I hate neutral site college football games, especially in state. Bring me to the campus. I love watching a game at Bobby Dodd. I love watching a game at Sanford Stadium. And Mercedes-Benz is fun for Sundays and conference championships and some of that. And I know bowl games have to be there, but I like Georgia Clemson there this opening week. It didn't have nearly the amount of juice it did the first time they did it. And then they played in Charlotte and they played in Atlanta. And it's just kind of like, for me, I just highly prefer that on college campus experience. And listen, what Jarvis was saying, this is the point. I mean, it's about making more money. It's about more people in the building. It's all that kind of thing. So from a perception standpoint and where Georgia Tech's headed, it's good for the Georgia Tech program. And it's good for Georgia to play in these big games like that as well. But it's just going to be, I feel like it's going to be received very ho-hum from the Georgia faithful in terms of like, okay, here we go. And also, I hope that Georgia Tech and Notre Dame pack this thing out, so you don't have that as the reaction of, okay, you're going to put another game in there and it looks like that. Because I don't know what it's going to look like in that Georgia Tech Notre Dame game. I hope it's pretty filled out, and Tech's got a good chance to win that game as well. So they should show out for that game. So I'm not a fan of these neutral site games. So when I heard that, I was like, I did with that news, Tenitra, and you may have not seen this, and they may have not even put this out. Are they planning on doing it on Friday, or do they just announce the location of the game?
Yeah, from what I saw, and I can double check it, but from what I saw, it remains on a Friday game.
Okay, I do love that. That's fun. That's going to be great. And that's also just good. I mean, listen, we got families, we got stuff, we got Thanksgiving, people are in town, so when that Georgia Tech game's isolated on Friday like it's going to be this year, when I saw that, I was like, awesome, this is great, because then it frees up that Saturday, because we got all sorts of football to watch otherwise. It's nice when that game's by itself.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it looks like it's initially scheduled still for Friday, but to your point, we'll kind of see what happens. And yeah, it could be predicated on how things go with Georgia Tech, Notre Dame. So Jarvis, bottom line, big game in Austin this weekend. Georgia wins if
Carson Beck shows up mentally. I feel like this is, if there's any game that he's going to come to play 4 quarters focused. That's my phrase for him. 4 quarters focused. Say that fast. I like that. If Carson Beck does that thing right there, I feel like this is the game for Georgia to take, to say, hey, y'all, I know y'all want to bring in new people and try to find another team to kind of take over the reins and all that stuff. But no, we still here. We're still here, and I think that's what Georgia wants to prove in this game. And I feel like it starts and ends with Carson Beck.
Yeah,
Indeed.
I think it's just high energy from the jump. Like the idea of a full fast start on both sides of the ball, not just okay, our first scripted series was great and it went well, but then punt. Just being able to not make any major mistakes early on, because what Georgia was able to do at Alabama in that second half was impressive, but I don't think they can do that again. I don't think they're necessarily built like that. I think that was kind of a special, unique type of situation. If they get down 28-0 in Austin, I don't think that happens. But this team has shown that it'll go down. It'll be brought down to whatever it is. It'll give up 30 points to Mississippi State at home. It'll hang with Clemson in the first half much longer than it needs to. So I think it's really important for them to start fast, continue to play kind of mistake-free as well, and force some turnovers. You heard Kirby at halftime. Like, I know KJ Bolden had that pick right before the half, but like punch that ball out, like make some plays, strip this thing, like cause a little bit of chaos. You're going to need that, take that crowd out of it, but fast start and continuing the fast start, not just from the jump.
Yeah. And I don't want to see Peyton Woodring nor Brett Thorson in the game. That will mean that offense is functioning on all cylinders. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Bulldogs for your second listen, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.